There is an internal dialogue that is founded on habits. It's something we usually call self-sabotage. That for the past many years, you've been in 2 or 3 or 5 relationships, none of them have worked. Now you're in a brand new one, and it's quite healthy. But it's something you've never experienced before, and it's a little new for you. And now you have internal dialogues, and they're not going to encourage you to continue with the relationship and going to discourage you, because that's the world that you know and you know well. You don't want to be betrayed, you don't want to be in pain, you don't want to be hurt, you don't want to be disappointed. So you have these dialogues, you whisper to yourself the narratives that you're most comfortable with. And you know them to be poisonous, but it's like when you're addicted to something. Just because you know it's bad for you, it doesn't mean you can quit. So eventually, this internal dialogue creates self-sabotage, and you look at Joe Schmo and you say, I don't think this is going to work out, and you walk away. That's one kind of it. The other is, it revolves around observation and reflection. The problem with observation and reflection is before you can actually begin to observe and reflect, you must come to a place of detachment. Let me explain. Imagine you're a Christian and I teach a New Testament class, and you say, this is a great class, I'm going to learn more about Christianity. Beautiful. And the first day of class, I say to you, today we're going to talk about the Gospel of Judas. Judas? The hell is Judas? I'm a Christian. I know what Judas did. Judas betrayed Christ. And then, you have this internal dialogue, right? That kind of makes you deaf in the class. You don't listen to anything I say. But add to it when I say Judas was in fact one of the best disciples that Jesus ever had. In fact, he was the only one who really understood him. Now, the truth is, because you think you're a Christian, and because you're attached to Christianity and the concepts, and because you assume and you're attached to the assumption that you understand the teachings of Jesus Christ, for example, you can't really observe, you can't reflect, you can't be objective. There is nothing about you that allows understanding. Now, what happens is, let's just say, attraction. I come to class and just like my beard. And you happen to have a good day where, for some strange reason, you're open to possibilities. And I say I'm going to talk about the Gospel of Judas. And even though you were raised in the church by parents who are devout Christians, for some strange reason, you're just open to hearing, and you listen. Now, when you listen, it means that there is something that's happened to your history. It's suspended, it's on pause. It's not interfering. In other words, there is this distance between what you're hearing, there's this gap, and your past, 20 years of being trained to be a Christian. This detachment, this separation allows you to listen, and then you go home. And then what happens, you're not in the class now, you begin to compare and contrast. Well, my dad has always said Judas was evil. This guy says Judas, in fact, was a sage. Now you become curious. Now you may go to your father and ask him, Dad, have you ever heard of the Gospel of Judas? Now, depending on your father's temperament, depending on how nourishing he is, how supporting he is, he'll either slap you or says, let's PDF, let's print it out, let's read it together. And he's not doing it because he wants to support you. And as you're reading, he has his pen, red, and he keeps marking. Now, should your curiosity remain, you say, well, let me go and read the 4 Gospels very, very carefully to see what exactly or who Judas is. And you realize that, first of all, he dies in 2 completely different ways in the Gospels. In one Gospel, he walks in, his belly opens, and it's called the field of blood, and he dies. In another Gospel, he hangs himself. Well, which is the more accurate version? Why do we have 2 completely different versions? And then you become interested. The problem with your interest is that this new interest has to deal with 20 years of being attached to you assuming you're a Christian and you're a sinner and Jesus Christ is this and Jesus Christ is that. Now, there comes a point where your interest blossoms to the point where you realize, oh my God, I'm losing my faith. You go to church, but it's become meaningless for you. Father tells you about the teachings, but deep down you laugh at your dad because you find him to be uneducated, even though he's the pastor of the church. And so, when you talk about internal dialogue, it has to do with how much the detachment lives inside you. Now, the thing you need to understand is, as I said, we are emotional animals. And for you to be able to have an honest and productive internal dialogue, you have to be able to observe, to analyze, to compare, and not to feel. You here to understand, to reflect, to come to a conclusion through sobriety of emotions and sobriety of reflection. You don't want it to be contaminated. You know, it's something that women are really, really good at when they get to be 35, 40. After having gone through like 10 bad relationships, at a certain point, the woman says, I'm going to go into my psychological cave and figure out what the hell is wrong with me. And then after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they figure things out. And then they, write a list. These are the qualities I'm looking for in a man. Now when they go out there, they're not going to be deceived by someone's looks, someone's money, someone's social status. They go for the jugular. How are you with your parents? Do you have any savings? What the hell do you do? Are you done with school? And you ask all these questions. And then as you check the boxes, you go home and you say, okay, how many boxes are unchecked? How many are checked? Okay? But this sobriety that you now have at the age of 40 is founded on 10, 20 years of assuming that you know, pursuing your assumptions, being betrayed by your own assumptions and other people. Then you find yourself in this particular predicament, which is, I hate myself, I hate my life. How could I have been such an idiot for the past 30 years? Now you sit. Now you're sad, you're lonely, you're depressed, you're miserable. Maybe you do therapy, maybe you do drugs, maybe you do alcohol, who the hell knows? But at a certain point, there is this breaking point for you. You sit somewhere. Say, okay, you know what? I'm going to study the best book that life has ever offered any human being. It's the book of my life experiences. And you're going to read that book very closely. And you're going to have a pencil in your hand. Every sentence that you read in your book, you're going to put some notes. And you're going to read this book over and over and over again. Make sure you haven't missed any words, any sentences, any paragraphs. And then when you've finished the book, you write for yourself a summary of this book. And the summary is, I'm an idiot. And then you say, how do I now overcome? Oh man, that's difficult. Because there are so many things you have to get rid of. But before you get rid of them, there are so many things you have to see. And in seeing, you have to feel. And in feeling, you have to figure out how to overcome some of the feelings. But you need tools. And then you need to know how to use those tools. That's a good internal dialogue. For those of you who enjoy internal dialogues, there's a book. It's written by Krishnamurti. It's a lecture he had in the 1960s. It's called Dialogue with Oneself. It's only maybe 5 or 6 pages, but he breaks down this thing called love, jealousy, resentment, attachment, all that stuff. And then in the end he asks, well, if you have any of these components, you don't love.